everyone. Welcome to 180 Media Academy. This is the second talk of this year's program. Yesterday we were here online live with Sean Dunn, documentary filmmaker, and today we're here with Peter Mack. He's a game designer who started out in film school and has amassed a 25-year career already of making various types of games, from Flash games way back in the early 2000s to more fledged out AAA games in more recent times. He's somebody who has a lot of experience with a lot of sensibility with both cinema and games, and today we're going to be exploring a bit about how these two things kind of interact, what games can do that cinema perhaps can't, and what filmmakers can kind of learn from the practice of game design. As always, 180 Media Academy is a place as well where we try to bring in creative professionals from various different sectors so they can kind of share their way of working, some of their ideas, and also share some thoughts about the industry they belong to and also how they see the world around them. So Peter, thank you so much for being here with us as well.
It's a pleasure.
Here in our office. If you're still kind of, if you're close by, you can feel free to also kind of join us here, but you can also watch online. So Peter, I think to start off, I would like to maybe go to the beginning. We've kind of discussed this a bit before as well. Tell us about your early days in film school. How was that experience, and what did you kind of learn at that time?
Right, we were talking about one of the first things that struck me when I went to film school. I went to the School of Visual Arts in New York, and it was early 90s, and independent filmmaking was a big deal right at that moment. Jarmusch and Rodriguez and Linklater and all those guys were a big thing. So I had a lot of ambition to make movies. And the thing that struck me, as I knew I was a writer, and I knew that was something I was interested in. And I guess the reason you pulled up these images, I had a screenwriting teacher who said something that was a bit shocking for everyone in the class, and I unfortunately I don't remember her name. She was brilliant, and I remember this stuck with me for a very long time, which was that it was art school, right? So she came in to show a film to her screenwriting class, which I was expecting to be, since I think we were seeing a lot of French New Wave kind of avant-garde cinema at the time. I was afraid, whenever someone took out a video or a movie to see, I was worried there'd be mimes or, something like that. But she put The Road Warrior, which in Europe, it's Mad Max 2, on. So of course, it immediately got my attention. To tell us something important about screenwriting, because this was a room full of writers who were all ready to get to work writing and doing a lot of writing, and she ran through the first, I'm going to say 10 minutes of that movie. George.
The director or
yes, the director.
I don't remember the name of the director. All I remember is Mel Gibson, actually. But yeah,
Miller. Thank you.
George Miller. Perfect.
And pretty much from the beginning of that shot, when it opens up and you see Max as he's being chased by what are obviously bad guys because they got a skull on the front of the car, and you see he's got a dog in the front seat, and significantly he's got a bandana on the dog, and so you immediately know, of course, this is a good guy because only good people put clothes on their dog, and all these things that you learn about the world. You see that, there's no gas. You learn that, he goes right through some wrecked cars with no problem, and the other guys have to crash through it. He's a good driver. You learn about him. You learn that, basically everything that you need to know at the end of that sequence, when I think at one point the guy pulls an arrow out of his arm, and he kind of winces when he sees it, which, you get a sense of his empathy, like he's sympathetic. So all that stuff, his personality, is learned in those first 10 minutes, and nobody says a word. Everything we need to know about the world, the character, was done, and and nobody said anything. And she said this to a room full of writers. Writers who were ready to jump in and start writing. Writing words for people to say, and narration and all the kind of stuff, fill the world with words. But what we learned at that moment was that we were now in a medium that was not what we were accustomed to, which is words, but that it was moving pictures. You could tell everything. And whatever we were going to write was just going to inform how the pictures were shot. We shouldn't expect to see our words on a screen, because it's not about that. So if you're out there, a screenwriting teacher from 1992, thanks for that, because it was important. Yeah, and that's relevant, that carried on in relevance to storytelling in games for me as well.
Mm-hmm. It's about kind of like resisting this urge of telling everything in the most obvious way possible as well, right? And that's something that...
Well, it's not for that. It is your tool in cinema is a camera, not a typewriter or a laptop or a pen. So if you are going to write stories, if you are going to make stories in this medium, it's necessary to learn how to use the medium well. And that is the most effective way to use it.
Mm-hmm.
It's through pictures.
And how does this kind of way of thinking and way of working kind of translate over into game design, more specifically?
So games has a very similar kind of understanding that if one is entering into it, certainly for me, as I entered into it, with the notion of telling stories and understanding stories in games, I also discovered that, well, the pictures that I had learned to make stories with, that's not how you make stories in games either. Games are also, like cinema is to novels, is another medium. And it uses another language and another basic form and another instrument for telling stories, and that's this, the controller. So jumping from a laptop to a camera and then to a PlayStation controller is something writers, I found I had to accommodate myself.
Mm-hmm. And how do games in specific kind of tell stories without narrating everything? Obviously, these days, I think there's been more and more of a focus of games that are very narrative-driven, very A to B to C.
We looked at one just a minute ago.
Yeah.
Which is very narrative, yes.
Mm-hmm. But what type of devices do games that don't want to resort to that type of strategy tell stories? Like, how do you kind of go from this idea of writing a script to setting up systems?
You mean if you want to tell stories in your game, because not all games need to or want to. Obviously, I mentioned to you before, I think Balatro is a poker game that just came out. Everybody knows this game.
Mm-hmm.
Not super important having a story in that game. It's a card game. So that doesn't mean it's not a great game. So I think where you can end up is, first you got to understand the assignment, right? So what kind of game are you making? And second, no matter what game you're making, or certainly if there's going to be a story about it, or in it, forget about it until you got this down, the card game or whatever is your core mechanic. That's the important thing. Once you've got that, once you know that that's there, or you have a plan to get that, is when you can think how a story will be involved. Now, if the point of the game, and if the assignment is to make a story, and to make a game that tells stories, has stories, then it may be more central to your core mechanic. And so it becomes more of a priority. But for my part, and the kind of games I like to make, they tend to be story-driven. They tend to have stories. I wouldn't say story-driven, but that there are stories that can be found in them. And to achieve that, because again, we don't it's not a movie, right? So the method that is selected for communicating that story becomes crucial for the designer to figure out what is the means. So it's that. And for me, as you've mentioned, it's using a lot of different systems.
Mm-hmm. There's a few examples as well, like because what you're saying also, when you start to create when you start resorting to specific systems that a player can interact with freely, and you're not kind of like guiding their path in a very telegraphic way, you're also kind of letting go of a lot of narrative control in a way. And what do you win by doing that? What do you gain by doing that? How does a game or a story become stronger when?
Well, that's an important aspect. I don't know if you're getting to this question, but what was mentioned in this talk was the question of if games are better or worse. I don't know if you're saving that one for the end.
But that's a good question already, I think. We can go into that already, I think.
It's related because, so the systems, if you are going to tell your story in a game, you have a different ways to approach it, obviously, depending on the genre of the game and the features of the game. But if you want to tell a story, if your goal is to tell a story, and the question is, can games tell stories better than movies? My answer is no, they can't. If I wanted to hear a story, watch a story, understand a story, then that probably would be my medium of choice. However, what games do far better than movies is they tell your story way better. As in, the story that you're going to have, the story that you're going to experience, is something you can only get from a game. And if it's a good game, then your story is going to be very different from mine. And so that is the thing games do, related to story and narrative, that movies never can, because the movie's going to be the same. Now, really good movies mean different things to different people. So one could say that you had your own story watching that movie as compared with mine. But nothing grants agency and control over your own story like this. Mm-hmm. So that is the significant difference. So again, my answer is no. I don't think they could tell it better, but they tell your story way better.
So the difference is that's it. Like, instead of telling a preconceived story, it's allowing the player to build its own, or help him tell his own story to himself in a way.
If it's a good game, yeah. That's it. You are the one driving the narrative. So, guy shot at you, hit the guy behind you. That was your best friend. He got killed. You wished you'd taken the bullet for him, but you hadn't, and now the guy has to respawn and go back to the beginning. That only happened to you. You crashed off the road and another guy got in front of you, like that. In that sense, that can happen to a lot of people. But at that moment, in that place, this is your story. Mm-hmm. And it's the story you tell your friends after you play. Dude, I was doing it. I made it through this thing, and this guy. So movies don't do that, obviously. Right? Mm-hmm. So for me, that's different.
Mm-hmm. There's a couple examples that I think we pulled up as well. There was this board game that you developed at Templar as well at the time. I don't know if maybe this is something that has a few examples of how that happens.
This is an example of decision making in stories, which is sort of a different topic, but it connects to it because one of the things that I learned, I mean, this is more related to the nuts and bolts of how do you make story, what are the different options available to you in making stories for games. If I can jump back, one of the things that happened to me when I grew up in New York, and I played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, sort of, I think these days young people call it Stranger Things, but yeah, it's popular now. It wasn't then. And I played with a lot of people that as happened, many of them went on to careers in filmmaking and in Hollywood, and writers and actors and musicians. So, excuse me, what happened playing Dungeons and Dragons was, I was the dungeon master.
Ah, okay. Makes sense.
I had to figure out how to do it because I didn't want to buy the store-bought things and just, you go through the thing. I was trying to create stories for the players to engage with. In fact, I had it. I had a deadline. I was 14, but, I had to, Saturday we were all going to play. I'm the dungeon master. They're expecting an adventure, so I had to write it. I know many people that play these games go through this on a regular basis, but I had to show up with a whole adventure prepared. Now, it's a game, right? So they're not going to, I can't just tell them what to do. They're playing. So my story is non-linear. It can't be linear. It's it can't be A to B. It's just, it's essential that what I come with is something that they can do, and yet it's got to have the qualities of a narrative. It's got to be fun and engaging and interesting. And so, how do you write a story without writing a story, or write a story about someone that you don't know what they're going to do? How do you write a story if you have no control over the main character? So this is something that everyone in the game industry has been dealing with for decades, but I'm talking decades ago when I was little, doing these things. The only thing I came up with at the time was to write a story about everything but the player. Which meant, okay, there's a evil king and he wants to take over the kingdom, so he's going to, disguise, use magic, whatever. I'm going to come up with stories about all the, and here's a farmer whose son's been called off to war, and and that guy lives over here. And if they go in there, which I don't know if they're going to go in there, but they might, and it's basically writing a story, but like way more of them than you have time for or should, and creating a world around them, and let the players land in the middle of it. That's one way to create stories. It's the only way I came up with to create stories, which was to write everything else going on in the world except what the players were doing. Then, as we played, they went through a door, they ran into this guy, they ran into that guy, or most often, I'd say 90% of the time, went down a street where I had written nothing.
That was also what I was going to ask. Like, what type of challenges kind of come up when you're trying to?
So this is why it was important for me to mention these people all became like working actors and writers and stuff. So improvisation was I think the result of all that. Thinking on your feet and be like, what the hell's supposed to be down there if these guys are over here? And then I got to figure out, okay, there was a war yesterday. These guys were fighting those guys. So today, this place would be ruined. So it's just okay. You walk down the street and the place is in shambles, and so it all works and it's connected. Makes sense. That is the challenge when players do stuff you don't have an answer for, and yet it became, and it was playing those games that the coolest thing in the world happened to me, which was I found myself involved in their story. I was supposed to be the dungeon master, and I remember playing one game where I was always one step behind. The guy had a plan, and it was such a good. I think he was an assassin. He figured out a way to kill somebody, and so he bought some poison, and then he bought this other thing, and he started doing all this stuff. I didn't know what the heck he was doing. I didn't know what he was doing, and I was supposed to know everything. And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna roll with this. This is way cooler than what I'd written, so I'm just gonna follow you. And at that moment, I realized that players, the coolest stuff in your game, in your story, may very well be the one you did not write.
But that's also, I think, what you were describing is also a very interesting thing, which I wasn't thinking about when you were talking about storytelling as well, which is you're not just putting out a story with a bunch of ramifications and then you let people have it. You're building on top of what they do afterwards.
You're talking about a tree, which I think I mentioned to you at one point. So that's, I think you are. A lot of people, especially traditional storytellers, go at games and they say, okay, they're going to come to a choice, which is kind of like what we have here, but this is different. Okay, I'm going to write a branch. And maybe what I was describing before sounded like that to people, except there was a human brain improvising. Again, for decades, I think game designers, and especially nowadays, people know this is not the solution. But for a long time, branching stories were where people's mind went to, were minded, as a solution to this problem. Okay, you can go this way or that way. So now I got to write this and this. Okay, so I get to the end of this branch, and now I got to go this way and this way. So I got to write these two, but I can't forget about these two over here, which this one branches, and so on and so forth, which for modern game development becomes prohibitively difficult, and you need the instinct to know when you have the scope and bandwidth to produce something like that. But that is the most sort of brute force direct way to approach a thing. And a lot of games came out over the years where, oh, it's got two endings. But that's not really emergent behavior. That's just a tree. Your endings could be the same as mine, unless I choose A, in which case it's going to be the same as it.
But are there any other games or other types of storytelling structures that can have this same phenomenon that you were talking about with Dungeons and Dragons, where every week you're reacting to what the player did, while instead of just predefining something? Are there any other examples like that, or is it just kind of unique to those types of role-playing games?
You mean my experience as a dungeon master?
I mean, more in general, like if there are other areas where you could do that.
This is the early manifestation of what were called immersive sims, which we talked about. So an immersive sim is any game that that makes the player's actions and agency the central focus of the game. And in order to do that, the designers and the developers create an inordinate amount of sort of machines that are running in the world.
I think this also connects a bit with what you were telling before about procedural generation.
This is an example of one. Because I don't know what road you're going to go down, I have a system in place which allows me to populate a dungeon or a room in a building or an office and create a different architectural layout for it. And that's a system that places geometry or what have you for the express purpose of creating an experience for you that is not the same as another player's might be, or for the purpose of realistically rendering an environment that, if you go into every building on a street and every room inside is the same, it doesn't make sense. So a system needs to be created that they should all be different, which means that when I tell my story about what happened to me, it's going to be different from what happened to you because the guy was hiding around the left corner and not the right corner, or what have you. So yes, immersive sims, which, there was a generation of designers before me, which are my hero, which are Warren Spector and Paul Neurath and these guys that did games like Ultima 6 and Thief and
I think you mentioned Bioshock as well, right?
well, those are the later manifestations, right? So in that tradition, people then understood that if you introduce a lot of systems to a game, the more you introduce, the more you can create a world in which things can happen that you did not plan. Now, it's bad when those things are bad, and it's a challenge, I think, for the testing department to, deal with that sort of thing. So I think a lot of studios, a lot of big publishers have steered away from the immersive sim in recent years in favor of, Last of Us, more linear approaches to games. I played. I don't get time to play enough games lately, but the kids. But now they're getting older, so maybe I'll get back to it. I played, games like Stray, which is awesome. Those you have kind of arenas where you can run around, and your story's gonna be very different from mine. But there is an overarching narrative that we are both following, that you can run around all you want in this zone, but once you go through this door, you're in the next chapter, as will I be. So that sort of macro level of storytelling is another approach people have. Create a sandbox in this one zone, and then, when I get the next chapter, the next piece of information, the next key, and I unlock the door and I go through, then I get the next chapter after that one. So these are all different methods people have.
Mm-hmm. How does this kind of, because I think already quite some years ago now, like time goes by so fast, but like I remember there was this huge craze in Netflix making these interactive movies that you could kind of choose your own path.
That's right.
What are kind of, do you think there are shortcomings to this type of media, or do you think?
It looks expensive.
Yeah.
Because you got to do it all. And this is, again, when it comes to immersive sims, if you have a system that you can rely on, that system is iterable and is repeatable throughout the world. I can go from this town to that town, and I will be experiencing and enjoying that same system throughout an environment. Those choice-based online streaming service games, which, again, if that's the assignment, there are ways to do that wonderfully, and they're super fun. And by the way, you can put them down after an hour or two, and it's fine. Immersive sims, you can also live in these things, and that's not super responsible either. And if you do want to tell a story that way, if you want to, and again, this leans in the direction of filmmaking. This leans in the direction of, I have a story to tell, I want to communicate this, I want to show people this emotional beats, this impact, I want this to happen at this moment. That's a way to get away with either doing both of those things or at least doing that one thing twice, which is tell two stories. What happens if you do this or that?
It's very much about creating a different type of immersion as well, right? You're just kind of, by letting go of that control, you're also creating a much deeper level of immersion with the player, no?
For the filmmaker?
I mean, when you're making any game.
Oh, as a game?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yes and no. That's an interesting question, but that's why I do it. That's why I would do it. I want to see what happens as much as you do, because this machine is awesome, right? So in an early version of Road Kings, we had a police officer that, we had a police unit that was following an AI. This is a prototype from a long time ago. Following if you went too fast, you got inside the perimeter of the unit, and it would trigger. His lights will go and sirens, stuff like that. Pull you over. If you were above a certain speed, there was a problem with one of the AI units that it was following a cube, and it was, all this. It was the system that it was using. Also entered the perimeter of the police unit, but because there was a problem with how that system was working, it was going above the speed. It was going too fast. The cop detected him. That guy. The police units aren't there for the other cars, the AI cars. They're there for you. If you're going too fast, you get a ticket. This guy chased some other car, and I was like, we're keeping that. That has to stay in because, we did not have to craft a special moment for this to happen. Oh, you go around this corner, and that's when you see someone being chased by a cop. That was an emergent behavior.
Mm-hmm.
It was because of a bug. But for me, that's why. You said, what is the cost or the price, or is it bad to you do the systems right, and you're building an immersive sim, and things go wrong, chances are they're going to go wrong awesomely, and it's going to be great.
Because the systems that you build.
It can also go wrongly. But yeah, sorry.
But it's just generates a much more powerful world, right? Like because the systems kind of start becoming organic by themselves as well at that point.
Exactly right. And so you have things happening in your world that you had not planned.
Mm-hmm.
But if you had planned them well, or if you planned the systems well, then it'll be cool.
Mm-hmm. And since you also brought up this latest project of yours, I think maybe a lot of you guys here and also online don't know what Road Kings is yet. This is
maybe not
the latest game that Peter has been working on. The release trailer is already out, but I think it would be interesting for us to kind of. This is what you're seeing right now on screen. Actually, is a semi prototype of the of the game. So we're talking about a game that's actually full 3D, AAA. It's for the Xbox, etc. This is just one step in the development of the game.
Yes.
But I think we can kind of go back to the very early in the beginning of how the game kind of starts.
Sure.
And I think if you could kind of walk us through that process, I think it would be really interesting as well.
Well, so this connects back to what I was saying about. Man, I hope I'm not going too long, but
no, it's all right.
I could do this all day. This goes back to the what we were saying about this being important, right? Just like the camera in Mad Max, right? Dude used no words, just pictures. Whether your ambition or your goal is to tell a story or not, whether it's a card game or whatever kind of game you're making, you got to worry about this. You got to worry about the inputs. You got to worry about the interface. You got to worry about the mechanic that you're doing. And for me, the best way to approach that is, that's step one on your road to creating a story. Now, I knew I wanted to have a story in Road Kings. And I knew there are stories of truck drivers that should be told and are good to be told, especially nowadays. But I also knew that before we could get to that, we needed to figure out some real basic stuff. Now, I knew we had driving, and that is itself a mechanic, obviously. But for this and for any game, really, creating a paper prototype of your mechanics is a good first step toward creating a fun experience for players, regardless of what the story is going to be. So it's absolutely agnostic that, this process of creating a prototype. And I've been surprised by how this is something that is sometimes skipped in the process. But the more rudimentary and the simpler and smaller and easier and faster you get, the easier it is for you to get where you want to go. It takes time to iterate on these things, but it pays off after. The only way to know if something's fun is to make it with the simplest tools possible and play it. So that's the first step. And what you're seeing there is an early prototype, not of the tactical part of the game, which is for me the shooting, the driving. In a racing game, in a shooter, it's the shooting. In a racing game, it's the driving. In a the tactical part, which is which way do I go? How fast do I go? How slow do I go? This is a prototype of the strategic and operational part of the game, which is sort of what people call the meta game. Sort of, what are you working toward? How much money do you have? Where do you earn it? What's your next move going to be? Planning ahead. And this is done with players acting as AI units. So what they did presumably would one day be an AI and not a person, unless it's multiplayer. But now it's easy to go both ways. So that's a crucial part of any development for me, is that prototyping.
So how does this kind of help you specifically? Because this game, also to give a bit more context, it's you're a truck driver, and then you have certain jobs that you can do. You can customize your truck. You can there's a lot of mechanics that go into it. You can customize it, choose where you want to go. There's choices that you have to make specifically as well.
Yes, and that's right. Is there a question in there?
How does this kind of help you start to map out all those things? You're just kind of doing them.
This prototyping. So to go from this to storytelling, I would say these are the things that need to be established first. And as I said, this is the game controller part that a screenwriter has to deal with. This is the camera that a screenwriter has to deal with. Sorry, my nose is running. And once you've resolved that, it becomes a foundation for your project, for your game, and it is from there that you can then, it becomes very obvious at that moment, and this is why it's so crucial. It becomes very clear and very easy, even on an instinctual level, where you can introduce stories and where your narrative can emerge. If you have something fun, which is sort of like, it's kind of like putting it together in the editing room. If you have something fun, then you can go from there. The story is, in a way, it's sort of the easy part. It's not, but it kind of feels like by comparison. Many times mechanics like this, and where you start is much like films. It comes from, and for Road Kings it was for me, it started with me reading books, thinking, what could the mechanics be? What are you doing? What is the task? What is the mechanic that you're playing? What are you working toward? What are you trying to do? And, as someone who admittedly is not a truck driver, but understands that this is a very storied and rich history and a big part of society, I understood there was a lot to learn. So I started reading, and from there came an idea on how to create the core mechanics for the metagame that's in there.
And also, and why I think another thing that I think is very interesting about this type of paper prototype, and also as well the terminal MS-DOS type of game as well, is
that previous prototype was sort of like if you were playing a game in 1965. This is more like playing it in 1985.
Yeah, I was thinking why. Because there's also another thing that we've kind of discussed before, which is that you see a lot of games kind of going for more high fidelity graphics, kind of going for really these big,
you don't
bombastic.
Think that's high fidelity? Look at my cheeseburger.
The cheeseburger is so cute. Also, I love the name of you probably can't see it, but the name of the store was Value Value Lodge,
It's
like
a,
that.
it's a
very-
motor lodge. Yeah.
It's a very Simpsons type of joke as well, I think.
Well, actually, I
But like, why do you think, like, at its core, why do you think that this, like, stuff like Oregon Trail back in the day, or something like this back in the day, why do you think this is so powerful as well? I think this is kind of a summary of everything that we kind of talked about.
I guess
But,
you never asked me that before, but why would you look at an old game from the 80s or 70s even and think it was powerful? I know what I think about it, which is that it's the same reason. I don't know. Kind of like when you're reading a book. There's a book that you love, and then you go into a bookstore or something, or someone gives it to you as a gift, the same book, and it's got illustrations in it, and it can be disappointing because what you were thinking was cooler. Or if you see a movie that had been that was an adaptation of a book you read, it's the same kind of thing. You're like, what I had going on in here was way better. So old games like this tend to leave that part of it to your imagination in exactly the same way. Which is not to say I don't love our art director, because he's amazing and did amazing things. But there's also one's imagination. So if you were to ask me, the little sort of Ultima bit graphics that I was dealing with when I was little, they were real to me. Those were people. So I think it's that. I think it's the less you are shown, the more you see.
I think it's very much like a common thread through everything that you kind of talked about here as well. So it's an interesting note. It's an interesting concept, I think, especially because as a storyteller, I think people have a lot of anxiety about not being misunderstood or not bringing across exactly what they want in a way. And it's about fighting that anxiety too, in a way. I don't know if that makes sense.
Relinquishing control in that regard, yes. I mean, I think if you don't, but this is also one of the things we talked about, which is that if you want to make a game that's good, in the same way you make a movie, I feel personally, when I do, I'm talking about you, I feel that it should be about something. And if for no other reason than it makes everything a lot easier on you. Once you know what your game's about, what your story's about, and that's actually a story thing, not a game thing. If your project's about something, if you can say what it's about truck drivers, or this is about a magic boy in prehistoric Portugal, or if you can say what it's about, then a lot of the decisions you got to make later on become you're only helping yourself in a way.
Cool. I think maybe just to finish off, since we showed the path towards the game, I think we can also show the trailer for it so that people can also get an idea of what's coming up as well.
Right. It's going to look a little different from the prototypes you saw.
Yeah. I'm not sure if this is playing already.
Well, this actually.
Ain't nothing finer than the open road. You'll see me riding when the new wind blows. I'll bring that heat. I'm riding night and day. Oh, night and day. Ain't got no master. Ain't got no king. I'm running night and day.
Savannah are facing severe wind.
Bad news, Deacon. Storm's almost on top of you.
I got eyes on it.
You can still turn around, you know.
Pineview won't hold out.
XDC Logistics.
They said you were coming. But take care now, you hear?
Let's get it done.
Ain't got no master. Ain't got no master. I'm gonna show
Deacon, you good out there? Deacon!
I think it's really fascinating just to see, like, again, how it goes from this to, how it goes from this to like a full-fledged game, and how much of the full game you can have in something like this, and then bring it out. And maybe, Peter, I think just to finish, there's an interesting idea that that you shared before, which is if immersive sims can kind of be can be documentary in a way. Can you elaborate a bit on that idea?
Oh, right, because we were talking about Dario and the festival.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So the question was, as you saw, this is a game about a truck. There are a lot of simulators I discovered when we were at Gamescom are a huge, massive thing, and in the industry. Now I'm realizing. And simulators of all kinds, flight simulators, farming simulators, lawnmower simulator, goat simulator, there's a lot of them. And the question was, are simulators the documentary films of the game industry? Which, honestly, after, while working on this project, I'd say the amount of time that I've spent researching and learning about drivers and their lives and all that stuff, I would say it's probably about as close as you can get. The audience for documentary films and the audience for simulators, I have no idea if there's a Venn diagram somewhere in there, but yes, I'd say I vote yes.
All right, I think I think this is kind of it. I think from us. I don't know if anybody has any questions or any thoughts that they want to kind of pick up on. Please feel free. I think.
Yeah, I'm
Peter's here.
tired of talking.
Yeah, or else like if
Anybody
you
else?
can't come up with anything now, we can also discuss it in a bit. I don't know also if in the chat we have anything from YouTube too, but yeah, if you guys want to. Yeah, go ahead. Can I
Please.
just can you give the microphone here to the gentleman over here? Yeah, it's not, we're not amplifying, but it's for the stream.
yeah,
So yeah.
So we were talking a lot about the relationship between Dungeons and Dragons or being a game master
Yes.
to video games and the idea of immersive games. First an opinion, then a question.
Please.
I do think that immersive games still gain a lot from having a focus, a main character that has a
Mhm.
focus.
Which many of them do, yes.
Like ADC2, for example, right now, which tends to be or tries to be immersive.
What did you call it?
Kingdom Come Deliverance.
Oh,
2.
right,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
sure, which
Talking
I
about
have
it
not,
before as well.
I have not yet played, but is
It is.
second runner-up with Baldur's Gate for most lines of
Yeah.
dialogue in the world.
And that's the comparison I want to make, actually, because I think Baldur's Gate tries to create an idea of Dungeons and Dragons like. But the focus is a bit lost on the character because supposedly you can be anyone in this world of Baldur's Gate. What do you think this
Right.
relationship of having a focus or not in the main character?
That's a huge question.
Yeah.
Or decision, I would say, if you're going to make something. Who are you? If I'm not writing a story about you, then who are you? And if you're not a person, then what are you? All those questions. Right. So, I'm sorry, what was the question again?
What do you really think that if you gain by not having this main focus of a character and instead...
Is it better to do one or the other?
Yeah. Because I do truly believe that for now it's impossible to be a dungeon master in a video game, in that sense.
Without crafting who the main character is.
Yeah, because you don't have the freedom to improvise. You always have to make a...
Switch out here with the mic, by the
Oh,
way.
whoops.
Please go ahead. Sorry.
I think you always have to make a finite number of choices or options. And you gain a lot from a main character having at least a focus. And I think it creates a relationship with the story, for me, much more involved then
You
can,
prefer
I
the
do.
character to be defined.
To be defined in a sense that it has
Sorry.
some way that I can choose or not. A bit of a personality changes, but not be an empty
Sure.
character.
Well, it creates some opportunities, but it also takes some away. I would say a studio or a team or designer that chooses to follow that path, that creates a Prince of Persia, that creates a Lara Croft or a that is one of the most important decisions they can make. It also opens them up to franchise possibilities in the future. So, but it means that from a production point of view, you are now going to tell the story of that guy or that woman, that person. Which means you're going to have things happen to them, not happen to them as you go, and that your production is going to need to incorporate this. You cannot rely solely on the systems to be endlessly extensible in any direction. Whereas if you are the man with no name, then the studio doesn't have to commit to creating all of that story around you. Can put their efforts elsewhere. It's just a choice. It's a tough call. Which one? I think if you're going to say which one's better, I think it depends on what story do you want to tell.
Do you believe that not having or having the empty character affects narrative in a bad way? Because you can't have as much.
Yeah, okay. All right. You want to get into it. But I think that you can just as effectively tell a story or the story that you want to tell with a main character. So going back to film school again, another thing that struck me as I was wondering as well about games, which I was super into as well. When a police car stops someone on the screen and pulls someone over, they look in the mirror and they look back and they see the lights. Now, we've all had that happen. Well, okay, maybe not all of us have had that happen, but that's happened to people that see that scene, and now you are empathizing with the person in the chair. So is it more affecting or arresting to watch somebody crying or to have something sad happen to you? Now, you could be a sociopath, in which case you don't care that somebody's crying. But I would argue that it can be more emotionally arresting that to see things happen to other people. I'm not a sociopath, that I'm aware. But I think there's a very different impact that it has. If you watch someone crying, if you watch someone in distress, whereas if the things are happening to you, I feel that it's a very different experience. And so, it made sense to me that if that guy getting pulled over by the cops was me, that I should be more emotionally affected by it than watching it happen to somebody else. But I actually think the reverse is true. So if you're going to go about telling the story the way I described before, which is don't tell the story about that guy, but tell the story about everyone else around them, are those stories being shown to the player or encountered by the player more arresting because it's happening to someone else? Or do you want to make the player the person who cries or the person who gets pulled over by the cop? Now, can you make a player cry? It's a tall order. But I know that you can have a sad story happen to somebody written and crafted in a very particular way. And that can be one of the NPCs. So, I don't think I've answered any of it, but these are all the elements that you're playing with when you get into that question. And in the end, like having a bunch of systems at work, I do what you want to do and see what happens.
Go ahead. If you can. Three of us grabbing for the same thing.
Regarding this idea of like more strict or linear storytelling versus sandboxing,
Yes.
which in my head is what tabletop role playings land on, or if they are to be good in a way.
Yes.
What's your opinion about full-on emergent storytelling that happens in like massive multiplayer online games like Eve or stuff like that, or even
EVE Online.
or even I don't know, Dwarf Fortress, or
Sure.
which I mean, Dwarf Fortress is single player as far
Did
as
you
I
say
understand.
Dwarf Fortress?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay.
Which in my mind can be a multiplayer as well, because
Yeah,
most
no,
of
it's
it happens on the forums where people talk about it and develop their ideas of it as well. So it goes
Okay.
even beyond the game
Modders.
in that yeah.
Yes.
So
yes. Sure.
yeah, that's what you think about those types of stories, and yeah,
Sure.
just
No, but that's the coolest one.
yeah.
For me, it's the same. Because, I mean, you can rely on multiplayer to make your game fun when the single player is maybe not so much, right? So, because hanging out with people is always fun. Like,
Yeah.
it's never bad. You know, they can be toxic and stuff, but
It can also be limiting, right? If you don't have someone to play with. So I guess
well, sure.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, then you're just running around an empty room.
But in the sense that you're not writing a specific story, sometimes even I don't know. It's I think it can be closer to Dungeons and Dragons and other things because you're
sure.
writing a plot and not a story,
Yes.
and you're like
Oh, no, it's awesome.
yeah. Just to add as well to the previous question, like. My first thought when you asked the question was just make the character's friend cry, and that's the direct thing. That's my opinion as well. So even in Dungeons and Dragons, like just have an NPC that's really important, and the players already are captivated by, and then have something happen to them, and then they have to go to the dungeon. So I think it might be closer to that in those like Eve or Dwarf Fortress in more.
I'd love to hear
sandboxy
your
games.
stories about weird stuff that happened amongst multiplayer players on EVE Online, because I mean, as far
Yeah.
as I know, it's spaceships flying around in space. I don't know, but yeah,
Yeah.
now that you don't have to get into it now, but
No, yeah.
I believe you. But yes, 100%. I mean, some of my most memorable things that are stories I would tell people about awesome stuff that happened come from me playing with a bunch of my friends playing. I think it was Neverwinter Nights. Like,
Mhm.
you know, I'm just going back a ways, but BioWare or Obsidian. You know, they had a trap, and it, you know, when it killed you, but then when my friend raised me, but all my stuff was on the ground, which meant I was just in my underpants, and then some orcs attacked, and then, you know, so, and they were going to kill him, and then they all got hit with a sleep spell. Everyone passed out, and the only one left awake was me, so I was running around in my underpants, trying to wake everybody up. You know,
Yeah.
nobody planned that. That was awesome. But it's multiplayer. It's always going to be, that will cover a lot of the,
Situations.
the mechanics and the systems and the machines that in a single player experience you would need to have running
Yeah.
to get the same effect. So I mean, I would put it at the same level, but you need people,
Yeah.
and your game maybe is not relying on the same systems or as you know, robust as it should be, given that you're relying on your player base to
Yeah.
do that
It's
with.
harder to scale as well, right?
And
Going from single player to multiplayer there's a lot of changes that you have to make too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. When I said EVE Online was thinking of those stories, I didn't play that game by the way. Just stories of people creating entire economies
Yeah,
and,
yeah,
and
sure, no,
companies and
huge.
everything. So yeah, as you said as well, it's like people fill in the gaps. So
They do.
the more you force a storyline or your idea of it, the more people have to fill in. So in my idea, or at least in my experience, in games in general, the more narrative focused it is, the less agency the player tends to have.
I
So
would agree.
yeah, it's always a balancing thing. So yeah.
Are there any more questions from anybody?
Yeah, one more.
Just finish off.
As I said, I can do
maybe
this
to-
all night.
Maybe to
And
finish
this
off.
is a very, I don't even know if it can really happen or not, but what do you think of the involvement that's starting to appear of AI in the way that it adapts to choices?
That's something
for
we were
example,
going to get into. Yeah.
the
I thought you were going to
finals.
hit me with that one as well, yeah. Sorry, again, the question is my bad.
For example, the finals has a very the multiplayer game has a very interesting use of the AI, which is the commentators are AI, and they react to what's happened.
What
in the
game does
arena.
that?
The finals by Embark Studios, the ones who just released Arc Raiders.
Oh, those guys.
Yeah.
All right. Really good in that game.
And what do you believe that, if it is even a good idea or not, and how it can?
That sounds like a great application.
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
You know, because this is obviously this is a really if there are writers in this room, if you guys are writers, yeah, a lot of people are worried about this stuff, and it's a big deal. But the fact is, the industry has games are made of AI, like they always were. Like Pac-Man was, the ghosts are AI, like they were the guys that, Pong had a single player, So I kind of, in a way, I kind of feel like games are the one industry that no one should complain about having AI in there, because it's what they are. My cars were AI, the cops are AI, everything's AI. So I developed a couple sort of fuzzy ones that look like they're supposed to look like they don't know what they're doing and they're making mistakes. Guys would shoot someone on their own team by mistake or whatever. For us, I mean, the question for me, look, I haven't thought probably enough about this to give it a informed and useful answer, but that sounds like a cool application, which to me is the point. It's how would you use it? I don't like using it to get people out of jobs, but I do know that I'm not writing 2.5 million lines of dialogue either, but I can edit them and I can, or maybe I am writing that, and we do need writers for that, because there's certain stuff that it needs to be crafted and it needs to be intentional, it needs to be on purpose and cool and well. But then there are other areas of the game, and that dialogue is probably that. But if I go up to someone in the street, in a game, the application for me that's most effective, that I would dream of, that I dreamed of when I was, starting out, was that there's an AI that can say, or there's an algorithm that says, this guy, somebody calls me, says, hey, I'm on the corner of 6th Avenue and Bleecker Street. Now, if that unit is moving around in the world independently, then that would have to be text, because those variables are being kicked to me from whatever is he's checking what position and where he is in the grid. But now, would I prefer that an AI formulates that sentence, says, hey man, I'm cruising down 6th Avenue, I'm gonna hang out a bit on Bleecker Street, If an algorithm in AI made that, if that's the only line and it made it cooler, then I guess, yeah, 20-year-old me would have been like, that's amazing. Yes. But do I want that same machine delivering the super, emotional final monologue that that character gives me. No. How you use it. How you use it and where you use it and when you use it, I think is my probably premature answer that I'll be sorry about later on.
Cool. And I think maybe with that we're running a bit over time as well. I think with that we'll finish off. I think you guys, if you want, you can also chat a bit with Peter probably afterwards after we finish.
Happy to.
I want to thank all of you guys also for coming out and joining us here in our space. It's always nice to have people here as well for these events. And thank you everybody who joined online too. And yeah, I think we'll finish off. Thank you very much, Peter, once again. I don't know if there's anything that you want to plug before we go.
I think we did it already.
Yeah, we did it already. So, cool. All right. Thank you very much. And that's it from us as well. All right.
Thanks.